Welcome to the Quality Meat Scotland podcast, which shares the stories, insights and people involved in the Scottish red meat sector. In this series, we will speak to farmers, vets, advisors, processors, researchers, hauliers, marts, butchers and retailers, as well as the fabulous team at QMS. I'm your host, Jane Craigie, and I'm looking forward to telling you the stories that matter about the iconic quality livestock of Scotland and the people that produce, process and retail Scotch beef, Scotch lamb and specially selected pork. In this episode, the first of 2024, we're talking market development of the Scotch brands. The red meat supply chain is vital for Scotland, generating an annual economic output of an estimated £2.8 billion, which is up 16% on 2016. QMS is integral to developing end markets and communicating the provenance, quality and the story of the people who produce the animals. Relationships with the end market, retail, food service and export are the focus for Tom Gibson, QMS's Director of Business Development. Geographically, Scotland, the wider UK and growing export markets are an increasingly important and successful part of Tom's role and input. Last year, Scottish exports of red meat and offal rocketed to a record high of over £93 million in the year from August 22 to July 23. The figures are up 16% on the previous period last year, pushing 14% ahead of their pre-COVID peak in 2019. Here's what Tom had to say about himself, his role, and the exciting development of both domestic and international markets.
Really excited to speak to you. We haven't actually met, but there's been lots of mention of your name and all of the good work that you're doing. And so I think it's probably fitting to get you to introduce yourself and tell us what you do for QMS to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, Jane. Tom Gibson, Director of Business Development here at QMS. I've been with QMS just over 5 years now. I originally joined as Head of Market Development, then I was Market Development Director and now Business Development Director with QMS. And that really encompasses all of the supply chain, pulling together and aligning the supply chain from all of the farm industry development side as well as the market development side, so that we've got a sort of integrated supply chain team that service all levels of the supply chain. And then previous to my role here, I worked at Scotland Cooperative, so a retail chain with over 200 stores. I was retail marketing manager there, so looking after retail marketing for all the stores. And that was where I originally became involved with QMS. We were going through a sort of support marketing promotion function where we were trying to promote local provenance in stores, the sort of Scottish industry, farming and food industry. I sponsored young farmers at the Highland Show. I sponsored AgriScot. And as a result of sponsoring AgriScot, we had the ingenious idea of getting the Beef Farmer of the Year product into stores. And that was the first time I ever spoke to QMS. So, guys, how could you help me do this? And I had some good conversations with QMS. And then round about that time, a role came up at QMS that I applied for and was successful. So I've got a wee bit of history with them in terms of the supply chain and understanding what we do in taking Scotch beef, in particular at that time, into an extended range within stores.
Oh, that's great. And having that retail experience, I think probably you're drawing on a lot in what you're doing now.
Yeah, daily, weekly, I speak to retailers. I've got the luxury of knowing how the supply chains work, knowing how they do their stock control systems, how they range products, and how all that side of things work. So that's really helpful for me when I'm speaking to all of the main retailers and discounters about stocking Scotch beef, Scotch lamb, and specially selected pork, and their ambitions for the brands, etc., etc.
And what sort of things are they looking for, Tom? And how does that change through a typical year?
Yeah, there's normally the product ranges will change slightly. They tend to have a spring product range change and they will have an autumn product range change. And then they will bring seasonal elements into it as well. So, if we look at our marketing calendar, that really reflects that. So if we get to Valentine's Day, a lot of retailers will do steak promotions. When we get to Easter, we talk about lamb and these individual products. There'll be seasonal product ranges that will come into the main range as well. But generally, winters will tend to be more sort of roast products. And then summer, you're talking about barbecue. So the space changing within stores reflects that. Some products will be there throughout the year, Jane. Your main steak ranges, etc., will be constant throughout the year. But there'll be certain products that dip in and dip out. what you'll tend to see now in summer is a lot more new product development around burger ranges, so fancier burgers, with added value elements and different ingredients in burgers. If you look at, just in a couple of weeks before Christmas, well, generally the last 5 days before Christmas, they'll bring in all their big, 4-bone rib roasts and stuff like that in the main supermarkets. So there's a constant to the range that underpins it, but then they'll drop in and out as the seasonal demands come into play.
And Tom, what is it about Scotch brands and the relationship with QMS that the retailers value?
I think it's the ability to tell the story, to tell the farming story, to tell the quality assurance story. That's what we do in a lot of our marketing. And I know they love to have that in store. They know it's so popular with Scottish consumers. You only have to look at the discounters and Aldi and Lidl and what an amazing job that they do in terms of Scottish suppliers and pulling all of that through and telling that story. You only have to look at the new store formats from Marks and Spencer's, where it's all about local supply and Scottish suppliers, not just in red meat, but throughout the store. So that's absolutely key to them because they understand how important. In Scotland is obviously a little bit different from the rest of the UK. We want to buy from Scottish producers, Scottish farmers, and the retailer offer really reflects that.
And as we look ahead to opportunities, part of your role presumably is navigating that, is predicting what those opportunities might be, both domestically and internationally. Where do you see the opportunities going forward, not just this coming year, but in the future?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunities there. I'm sure there's opportunities in terms of our current customers and what they are eating and consuming. But again, that's more a sort of hearts and minds piece on the value of red meat and the health values, etc. So there's certainly opportunities there, but there's market opportunities as well. I think key for us, probably in terms of some of the butchers work we do and the wholesale work we do, is taking extended ranges into England through wholesale supply chains is really important to us. And then we've got some of the work that we also do with our Scotch Butchers Club's got over 250 members now in the UK, mainly Scotland. So we want to see that develop into England. And we also now have a couple in the last 6 months. We've picked up another couple of Scotch Butchers Club members in Europe as well. There's opportunities there. And we're talking about how we further develop those opportunities in market events, etc. Lots to go for in terms of how we play there. And then we've got real big opportunities in the export markets. We've just done the Anuga trade show back in October there. The previous year in Seattle and Paris, our export companies, I think we did on stand with us. So QMS will go over, build the trade show stand, build a kitchen, take chefs, take the kitchen teams with us and cook samples and invite our exporters to come on and use the stand, and we do samples for their customers, etc. We talk about the provenance, we talk about quality assurance, traceability, all of these things that are really important in the export markets. I think Seattle 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, we had £14 million worth of new business, which was phenomenal in terms of exports. Just doing the final totting up of figures from Anuga now, but we have beaten that figure, so more new export business coming on board. So there's lots of opportunity there as well, and I know we'll probably go on to touch on it, but we've got an opportunity now for the first time ever with halal Scotch lamb, and there's some big opportunities there, and we're currently doing some work in the Middle East with that regard.
Before Christmas, you put some news out about the serving of Scotch lamb on St Andrew's Day prior to the COP28 summit. How did that go?
It was great. It was a project we'd probably been working on for 6 months previous, ourselves and Woodhead Brothers, the processor based in Turriff, who provide and can now do internationally accredited halal Scotch lamb. So we've been working with them, our Scottish Development International partner. So that's really the export arm of Scottish Enterprise. So the team in Dubai there, and also with a company in Dubai called Food Source International, who are the importer for us over there. So we've basically had a 6-month project there building up to the start of the COP28 dinner, and SDI had a Sustainable Food from Scotland dinner, and we had First Minister Hamza Yousaf at the dinner, and the first consignment of halal Scotch lamb into the Middle East was served at that dinner, and it was sensational. So it was nice in a chilly end of November evening back home to be in the slightly warmer climes in Dubai on a terrace serving that to a whole host of buyers and chefs, importers, etc. over there as well. So yeah, it went really well. The product from Woodhead was absolutely sensational. We got a fair bit of interest there, and we're planning to head back over in February to Gulfood to follow up on that.
And Tom, that deal is to supply 5 countries, isn't it, in the Middle East?
It gives us the opportunity to get into all of the GCC countries. So, you've got Saudi, Bahrain, and a few others that the HCO accreditation, allows us to access. So yeah, and many more countries as well, Jane, that we can go to. But Middle East would be one of the key targets there, because it obviously is an affluent area. If you look at Dubai, some incredible restaurants, incredible hotels, and we think our product absolutely fits that market. We relaunched our strategy back in June at the Royal Highland Show. And, the kind of mission or the vision is to make Scotland the choice for premium red meat. And we think the quality of our lamb going into that Middle East market is absolutely sensational. It is a big lamb eating market, obviously, the halal market. So, it absolutely ties in with that perfectly. So hopefully we'll do some follow-up work at Gulf Food, which is the big trade show in Dubai. I think if we talked previously about Sial and Anuga, they tend to be sort of perceived as the biggest sort of food and drink trade shows, certainly in Europe and probably around the world as well, for our exporters, really. But Gulf Food now is really coming up, being considered a worldwide show as well. Seems to increase year on year. So we're going over in February with our partners over there, Scottish Development International, accessing their stand, and colleagues from Woodheads coming over to do some follow-up events, meet some buyers over there, and hopefully for Woodheads to secure some deals that will see regular consignments going over to the market.
And it sounds like, Tom, at these trade shows, there's a lot of competition to get people onto your stand. It sounds like you very much celebrate the cooking, the eating, and the story of the Scotch brands. Tell me what you'll be doing at Gulf Foods. Will you be doing that? Will you be cooking meat as you do on your other show stands, or will it just be static display?
We'll certainly be cooking. We'll have a couple of different elements to it, Jane. When we go over there, we're on the SDI stand, so we'll have a chilled display over there. We'll also have product on the Food Source International stand as well, so they'll be cooking over there. And we'll have a big reception dinner on the Monday night, the first night of the show, for guests and buyers and importers to come and sample the product as well. And we'll put on another really good event there and invite a whole host of buyers along to that. So that's absolutely key for us. But I think you're right. We want the product to stand out. We want to be the choice for premium red meat when you go to these big trade shows. To be fair, a lot of it is commodity, volume-driven product. And I'm sure you have seen the pictures of our stand at Anuga. Our stand was very much a premium stand. If you walk up and down the aisles, our stand was jumping out to say, look, this is premium. We had 2 massive dry aged chills front and centre to let people see the quality of the meat. And if you're at a meat show, they want to see the quality of the meat. That was a big draw in terms of getting them onto the stand. Then once they're on the stand, our exporters can strike up a conversation with them, or they can ask us for more information, and we take it from there.
The lovely thing about the partnership, and having spoken to QMS about this deal that led to the dinner in Dubai, is that it's all about partnership, Tom. So you can't do this, you can't do your job without the processors. And collectively working with Scottish Government to access those markets, to look at those priorities, I think it's such a lovely example of the successes of collaboration. We always talk about collaboration, but this is really proof of the pudding, isn't it, that it works?
Absolutely. And I think we're very lucky here. So I sit on the Scotland Food and Drink UK Market Development Board and the Scotland Food and Drink Export Board. Also on the export board are SDI and our partners there, as well as a host of other businesses and sectors. But it's at these quarterly updates where we sit and we plan out what activity that we've got jointly for the coming, weeks, months, years ahead, what shows we want to attend together. And at that stage, we start building, the plans to say, okay, I would go to them 6 months out and say, I want to probably come to Gulf Food. What can we do there? Or we're going to have a stand at Anuga or Sial. SDI team members for those markets will come along, support us, introduce us to people in market, etc. as well, because they have really good contacts and they will know a lot of the importers in the different sectors as well. And it's just contacts that, to be absolutely honest, Jane, we wouldn't be able to get sitting here in Scotland. We need someone in market to do that side of the work. And it is quite, it's legwork, getting out there and meeting people and understanding how the market works and what product ranges they're looking for in market. So the whole Dubai UAE lamb story is a great example of how that fits and everyone works together to get the product over and get a good end result.
And Tom, I was going to ask you as well about the Scotch Beef Club relaunch. I know that you've got some international activities linked to that as well. Just talk me through that.
Yeah, absolutely. Scottish Beef Club is something that we've historically ran at QMS, and then with COVID and everyone in lockdown and restaurants being closed, a lot of that sort of fell away in terms of the work that we were doing there. So what we decided to do once we were sort of back up and running, and all the supply chains were working again, and Scotch was getting into the right markets and the right restaurants, we decided that we wanted to really elevate the visibility of some of these restaurants, because our product is going into some absolutely amazing restaurants across Europe and the rest of the world. Some very famous chefs take Scotch beef and Scotch lamb across their international restaurants, and we've just got some fantastic restaurants out there. So we wanted to highlight that with a relaunch of the Beef Club in the first instance. So a good example is we are over in Milan on the 1st of March working with our partners at Dunbia Highland Meats. And what we're going to do there is we're going to jointly host an event and invite, I think we've got about 60 buyers or potential customers and potential customers coming along. And what we'll do there, first of all, there'll be a QMS presentation. So we will then talk about, the qualities of our farms, the qualities of our livestock, all of the farm assurance and quality assurance that actually underpins that, the traceability of the product back to Scotland and back to the processor. We'll then look at a range of cuts that would be particularly relevant to that market in Italy. And then we'll have we will be doing a chef tasting session. So the chefs will be cooking these different cuts and letting everyone try them in terms of the buyers, letting them try the cuts. And we'll have Dunbia Highland Meats will also do a little bit of a presentation potentially from their side as well. And we may even do a butchery demo if it's relevant as well, just to let people see how the carcass breaks down. Put the final details to it, but it should look something like that. That will happen the 1st of March. And then we'll also do another 4 events with our big exporters so that everyone gets a fair crack at the whip. And the reason behind it, or one of the main drivers for it, Jane, is to say, if we ran an event like this for you to the processor, the exporter, what market do you think for you would make the biggest difference, or where's the biggest opportunity? And we want to put a resource. So the supply chain's already there. It's not like going out to the UAE and Dubai and you have to put the links of the chain and the supply chain together before you can actually get out with the product. This is a little bit smoother because the supply chain's already there. They already have Scotch beef and lamb going out to these countries and to their depots over there. They'll have sales teams in these countries as well. So we're actually just doing the real gloss, putting the gloss on it to say, look, this is the quality of the product. This is what we from QMS can let you or talk you through and maybe explain the merits of the product a little bit more. And then when you give them, the range of cuts to sample and tell them the story and show them the videos of the farm, we've got some amazing footage now in terms of some of their marketing materials, drone footage in Scottish farms and on beautiful days, and the quality of the livestock that we've got in terms of some of the filming. So it really brings the farming story to life, I think, which is amazing to see. And that really helps us sell it as well.
And Tom, you touched on food service. How important are those markets to you and how are they developing? And also tell us the story about the Devonshire in London.
Food service markets are really important to us, but especially just now, it's quite a challenging market, certainly in the UK. Restaurants, I think, are having a particularly difficult time when we talk about cost of living crisis, and it has impacts throughout the chain, really. But we've got product out there in some fantastic restaurants, and we want to make sure that those supply chains stay in place. So not just throughout Scotland, the rest of the UK, down in London, and in some of our international markets as well. And, that's a great example that you picked up on, the Devonshire down in London, a restaurant, a grill within a restaurant that recently opened just before Christmas. Charlie Carroll, the chap that started the Flatiron chain of restaurants, absolutely amazing restaurants, fantastic quality product. And just a great idea, I think, in terms of, the whole service proposition that you've got if you go to a Flatiron restaurant. Brilliant. So Charlie, that owns that, opened up a pub. Not managed to get there myself, but I've seen the photos and the videos. It looks absolutely amazing. They've had incredible reviews coming back from a lot of very famous restaurant reviewers and all the broadsheets and the main UK papers. It's just been nothing short of sensational in terms of some of the reviews. And delighted to say that all the beef served there in the Devonshire comes from Grant Moyer and the team at AK Stoddart. Sourcing a lot of Scottish cattle, everything that's serving the Devonshire is Scotch. So absolutely prime. And the great thing about Stoddart's is they have an amazing service to their food service clients in the restaurants. They sit and they agree a spec with them, a real high-end spec, in particular for the Devonshire. They agree a spec with them, and then, they go out to source the cattle that meets that spec. And as they go through the cutting plant, they will look at every cut of meat and only select certain cuts of meat that meet that exacting spec, so that you can be guaranteed that everything that's going to the Devonshire is absolutely incredible quality. So it's a great story, and they're getting some rave reviews, and it's all Scotch.
I read some of what Charlie Carroll was saying about the meat, and he couldn't have been more positive. He very succinctly explained why Scotch was important. He said, well, it's kind of the epitome of quality.
Yeah, we do have that great reputation, and I think that's for people that know it in Britain and are in the trade and understand the quality of the production and the livestock, then that's great. But it's our job now to tell that story elsewhere in the world as well, for people that may not have been brought up with Scotch. We overproduce in terms of we're more than self-sufficient in Scotland, so a lot of our beef goes down to England, and people understand that and know the quality because we've done that for tens of years. It's also been able to tell that story now in some further flung markets as well, which is important for our producers, so it really bolsters the supply chain from the farmers all the way through processors, wholesalers, exporters, etc. It's a great story. It's an incredible product, and it's just a pleasure and a privilege to be able to help a little bit in the journey and getting people to try it and taste it and love it.
I think it's also testament to your team, Tom, that your budget isn't significant compared to some of those other countries that are out there that you're competing against. You've got a small budget, but you're very mighty in how you develop those markets. And I think that does go back to that point about the quality of the product, the quality of the brand, and also that important point about collaboration with ScotGov and also the butchers and the processing trade.
Absolutely, and I never mentioned it when we were talking about it earlier on, but when we were at a Nougat trade show, we have incredible support from ScotGov. So we have every year when we do the big European shows, we have Cabinet Secretary Mary Goujon with us, and George Burgess, the Director for Food and Drink and Agriculture within Scottish Government itself, and they come over. They spend a couple of days with all our processors, chatting about the challenges that they've got in their business and how they can potentially support and help. They meet all their customers and potential customers. They come along to a big, great British beef dinner that we have every year as well. And they honestly couldn't be any more supportive of the sector when we're out at that event. So it's great to have them. And I think the big thing for me, Jane, is we go there. We've got about 45 people on stand, and it does very much feel like a Team Scotland approach. We've got government behind us. We've got the kitchen staff there. We've got all of the processors. All the processors obviously know each other. And okay, they may be in competition, but they're very much out there championing the Scottish story. And it's something that they all do very well. And, every one of them, when I do the ring round afterwards, has enjoyed the show, and it's been very worthwhile for them. So yeah, it is a great Team Scotland event. And I think it's good for government to see everyone there together as well as an industry. We're all joined up. We're all trying to do the same thing. We're all trying to work towards the same goals. And okay, our exporters may be in competition with each other, but there's plenty of business out there for them all to crack on and get their teeth stuck into. Pardon the pun.
Well, thank you, Tom. I think that's a really positive note to leave on, and just really praise to you all in your team for the great work that you do to promote our red meat.
Thank you very much. It's an absolute pleasure to do that. We all love it, and long may we continue to produce such high quality beef, lamb and specially selected pork, and we can help sell it both in the UK and around our export shows around the world.
Brilliant, Tom. Thank you.
Another member of QMS's leadership team is Emma Heath, who joined as marketing director last year, bringing years of experience in building Scottish food and drink brands, including the famous Grouse, Macallan and Nairn's Oatcakes. I can think of no one better to further build the brand reputation and reach of the Scotch brands than Emma. Here's my conversation with her. Emma, it's lovely to speak to you. We haven't met in person and we're recording this on Zoom, so it is a little bit diminished, but it's lovely to see you and speak to you. I thought we'd start by, there's a lot of people that have met you, but there are some that won't have. Just tell me a little bit about your background, what you've done before you joined QMS, and also what you're now doing with QMS.
Yeah, it's quite scary, Jane, to be honest, because it's my 30th year of working this year, and it's suddenly starting to make me feel really quite old. So I am originally from the West Midlands down in England, born and brought up in Wolverhampton, and I escaped to Scotland in 1990 to go to study marketing at Strathclyde Uni. And at that point, I'd never actually been to Scotland before, so it was a bit of a leap of faith. And I remember when my mum dropped me off, she's like, "You sure you know what you're doing?" It's like, "Yeah, I'll be fine." Hadn't even seen the university, never been to Glasgow. And, all these years later, 30 years later, I'm still here. So I've built my entire kind of adult life and career living and working in Scotland because it is the most remarkable place. I feel so lucky to have settled here. So when I finished at Strathclyde Uni, I got a first-class honours degree in marketing. I was lured into the world of advertising because that was one of the things that I absolutely loved in my final year. I had some really inspirational tutors. So I spent a couple of years working as a graduate trainee at the Leith Agency, who, even I think they celebrate their 40th year this year, still remain one of Scotland's best loved ad agencies. And it was such a brilliant place to kind of build a career working on some great brands, getting to work with some brilliant people and just learning some of the real basics about marketing in the real world, how to speak to people, how to join in, challenging conversations. I had a brilliant time at Leith. And then after that, I moved to Scottish and Newcastle, and I was there for about 4 years working on some great beer brands. And it was back in the day where, budgets were crazy big and there was lots of really interesting things that you could do. The kind of regulation around alcohol advertising wasn't quite as tight as it is now, which presented both opportunities and challenges, particularly when people weren't feeling very brave and always needing to stay the kind of right side of responsible. So I learned a lot there about kind of regulation, and also working on McEwan's Lager. It was the first kind of truly Scottish brand that I worked on, and that was just being relaunched when I joined there. And that was a great kind of early segue into how to kind of rebrand and reposition Scottish food and drink brands. So after working there for 4 years or so, as I said, I moved into the world of premium spirits, working for Maxim UK. And I think of all the jobs that I've done, it was without a doubt the most diverse because the portfolio was just so wide. Everything from sort of shop brands like Aftershock and Sours, which I was involved in launching in the UK. A lot of farmers, when I tell them that, all nod, and I think it's given me some instant credibility, bizarrely. And I worked probably the most of my time there on Scotch whisky, so brands like Famous Grouse, Highland Park, Macallan, the Glenrothes. And I think, a passion for storytelling really kind of found me working on those brands where you've got phenomenal kind of history, heritage, backstories, the people that have worked in the industry for many years. It's marketing gold dust for brand marketeers to kind of translate those messages into stories that will help you sell those products in the UK and abroad. So I left the drinks industry. I was nearly 15, 16 years at Maxim, I think, working across lots of different brands in that time. And I just fancied a bit of a change. And as seems to be the way with all the jobs that I've done, things find me when I'm not really looking. And a chance conversation with a friend and then with a recruitment consultant I was actually working on another project with led me to Nairns. So my transition from booze to biscuits. And I spent 8 amazing years at Nairns, joining the operations board there and going in really to create a proper kind of marketing function to generate lots of new products to help them fill their pipeline, particularly in gluten-free, which they just secured a big new site to build a factory when I started, and that has been a joy. I'm actually sitting here with a box of Marmite and cheese oatcakes, which is the very last product that I launched just before I left. So yeah, I'm still a huge Nairns fan. That was my lunch today. And I worked on a really big piece of brand repositioning, which I'm sure we'll talk about in the context of Scottish brands a little bit later on. I absolutely loved my time at Nairns, but I just got to the point where, having been almost 30 years in marketing, I felt I needed to kind of hit the pause button a little bit and just decide what I really wanted to do for the next 10 years. I hit 50 last year as well, so I think it was all a bit of a kind of milestone thing. And so I took some time out and had a bit of a career break and spent some time with my family. My daughter was just about to start high school, so I spent some precious time with her. And again, another chance conversation with somebody else and a post that I put on LinkedIn led to a conversation with Sarah Miller, our CEO, who it transpired was looking for a marketing director. And I met her for a coffee and a chat and went into the process, and the rest is history, really. So yet again, another kind of job had found me. And in this case, it was very different to the reasons that I joined other roles in the past. I think, just being in marketing, particularly in Scotland for so long, I wanted to do something completely different. And my incredible mentor, had said to me the week after I joined theirs, so Emma, what is it you want from your next job? And I said, Jackie, I've literally just finished. I'm going to take some time off. And she's like, no, you're not leaving here until you give me a couple of words of what you want from your next job. And I was like, oh, I don't know. And she's like, no, come on, quick, 2 words. Don't think about it too hard. And I don't know where it came from, but I said people and purpose. And then literally 2 weeks later, had a conversation with Sarah. So yeah, I think this job was meant to find me. And at a time when, QMS have just launched their 5-year strategy last year at the Highland Show, I met with Sarah literally a couple of months after that had happened. We've got a really great opportunity to do so much as an organisation, and joining at a time where we can make a difference and that I can make a difference, it seems like a really good place to start.
What a fabulous background. And when we were talking before we hit record, you were talking about going into a supermarket with your daughter and seeing the Nairn's biscuit packets all on the shelf, and you're starting to order them in the way they should be ordered.
I'm so bad for that. I still do. If whiskey bottles are on the shelf and the labels are kind of back to front, I'd sort of turn the bottles round, and I have been known to re-merchandise little kind of displays of beer as well. Yeah, my daughter is mortified. But I think when you work on a brand, and I'm lucky enough that in my entire career, I've never worked on a brand that I haven't believed in. I don't think I could. They just leave a kind of imprint on you. And marketers often talk about, it's often a privilege to write their chapter in a brand storybook. And I certainly feel that way with the brands and businesses that I've worked on.
What a lovely way to look at it. And you've touched a lot on, I suppose, people and purpose. It comes through a lot in what you've just said. And I think for brands to really work, the people that are behind them really need to feel that. And that does take me on to that point about passion. And I think there's a lot within Scotland's brands that all of the good brand builders of Scottish brands have that passion and that belief in Scotland. How do you think that translates into the products and brands that QMS upholds?
Well, I think, provenance is just at the heart of, everything that we do at QMS. And without our wonderful 3 proteins being produced in Scotland, being able to shout about Scotland and the QA scheme that we have to underpin all of that, we don't have anything. And, other Scottish food brands are often the same. I was looking in my cupboard actually just before we spoke. And actually, personally, over the years, just living in Scotland all this time, my cupboards are full of really lovely Scottish brands, from Baxter Soups to the Nairn's Oatcakes I've just shown you, Taylor's Crisps, Orkney Cheese. And most recently, I've discovered the fabulous North Highland steaks in Sainsbury's, which my husband and daughter had for their dinner last night while I was out with my QMS colleagues. I think Scotland is almost, to a lot of people, a kind of shortcut to quality and assurance. People see that things are Scottish and most people go, oh, well, that must be pretty good. We're not a country that's associated with rubbish things. I know that sounds like quite a flippant comment, but from the amazing cities that we have, the amazing products that are produced, the way of life, Scotland has great history, great heritage, so many wonderful backstories. And so many brands, Scottish brands, have those wonderful backstories that they can weave into their communication. So, at QMS, we're so lucky that we have great heritage, great, history in a lot of the farmers that we work with, the processors that we work with. People are at the heart of everything that we do, which gives us lots of useful kind of input, ways to tell stories. But I think one of the things that I'm really keen to do as we go into the new year is to really look at how we can tell a story about what's behind the label, because ultimately that is what is important, and that is the reason that people will buy Scotch beef, Scotch lamb and specially selected pork. And I think it's really important for them to properly understand what those blue badges that they see on packaging really mean. So, yeah, we've got a great opportunity to tell some stories in a different way, and now is that time, I think.
And in terms of markets, Emma, so before Christmas, there was some news that went out about a deal that had been done with the Devonshire, an upmarket restaurant in London. But also there is a demand for people who are watching their budget to buy well and to buy products that are going to last them maybe 2 or 3 meals. In your role, when you're looking at those market opportunities, how do you embed the values of those Scotch brands in your marketing?
So again, I think we're very lucky that with Scotch beef, Scotch lamb and specially selected pork, we cover so many different bases, from, really high quality, more premium, expensive cuts that people can, use to treat themselves, or if they're, going out for dinner and they have a really fabulous Scotch fillet steak, that's at the sort of top end. But also, certainly with the cost of living crisis and, people turning to local butchers, for example, for advice, they can get a great wealth of knowledge from the local butchers to use some of the cheaper cuts to make some really delicious. And coming out of Christmas, on top of the cost of living crisis, which is very much a part of everybody's day-to-day life, people are feeling the pinch, having spent a lot of money on, lots of things at Christmas, from, foods to gifts and entertaining. And this time of year, when it's also cold, people are staying in a bit more, it's a great opportunity to look at different ways of cooking things, trying new cuts, trying new recipes, batch cooking to fill the freezer. And we really want to encourage people to look at the versatility of all of the three meat proteins. It's not just about, steaks and premium cuts, using mince, using cheaper beef cuts to make some, delicious casseroles at this time of year. There is so much opportunity and so much inspiration to do things differently with red meat. And our website, actually, the Make It Scotch website, has got a whole section dedicated to the recipes. But I wouldn't underestimate the role that the butcher can play in this. When I was preparing for my interview, I went into our local butchers, Lawson's in Winchborough, and had a really great sort of 20-minute chat with them. And just, they love the opportunity to tell people about what they do and how they do it, and to get you to think about things in different ways. So if anybody's not sure what to do with meat, or if anybody's kind of stuck in a bit of a rut and is just using the same stuff that they've always cooked with, go and have a chat with your local butcher. It's a really enjoyable experience, actually, because they're so passionate about what they do. And we work closely with a lot of butchers throughout Scotland to help them educate their consumers in the best possible way. And we provide them with point of sale materials. Gordon Newlands, who you've probably met in our team, does a cracking job with a lot of butchers across Scotland, because there's a great story to be told by them about Scotch meat. And many of them have their own farms as well. So, you can be absolutely sure of where the meat is coming from too.
And Emma, you touched on quality assurance and the importance, and you're relatively new to QMS. For you, in building the brands that you're responsible for, and also in the conversations that you're having with end markets and with consumer groups, how important is that assurance?
It's absolutely vital. Without the quality assurance scheme, I have nothing to market. You would have my hands kind of up my back. And I think the thing that's so important to say about quality assurance is that it is the mark of why good is good. It's not something that should be feared by the people that have to go through the assessments. It's basically, proving why what you do is good, so that we can then take that message of why good is good and talk to retailers about it and talk to consumers about it, because that kind of why good is becoming so much more important in the way that we live, with some people choosing to cut down on the amount of red meat that they eat for whatever reasons they choose. Eating less but eating better is a trend that's being seen in a lot of things, from meat to Scotch whisky, for example. So people drinking less, but when they do have a drink, they make sure that they drink the best that they can. I think the QA scheme is absolutely vital, and we restructured the organisation just as I was joining, and the brands integrity team that managed the QA schemes and set the standards, they now sit alongside the brand team, so under one functional director. So I think that shows the importance of linking marketing to QA going forward. The two are kind of inextricably linked.
I think that point that you touched on around choices and decision making, there's the confidence that quality assurance gives. But there is also that point about the decisions that people make about what they're going to buy, what they're going to cook. How are you tackling the sort of increase in plant-based, the increase in flexitarianism or pescatarianism, where us as an industry, we're looking to see people eat red meat more regularly and, as you say, to source it with good judgment, I suppose, is the best way of describing it. What are you doing with your marketing to tackle that kind of challenging minefield of meat or protein choice?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. And actually, I've just been on an insight group call with a whole load of other colleagues from across the Scottish food and drink industry. And, one of the things that we were talking about was, whilst there has been a role for plant-based in some people's diets, as an industry, there is a lot of challenges now in plant-based, and a lot of it is linked back to ultra-processed foods. Many plant-based products that you see on the shelf, they're not all ultra-processed, of course they're not, but they're not necessarily as sustainable as people think they are. So what we can do as a red meat industry is really encourage lots of positive conversations to be had around red meat. So talking about provenance, talking about quality, talking about the fact that it's real food, talking about all of the health benefits that eating red meat brings, all the kind of micronutrients that it can bring, the role that it can have to play in a healthy, balanced diet. So at this time of year, sort of January, February, where a lot of people are starting the new year as they mean to go on, and they're starting to think about their food choices, their diet being kind of, better or more balanced. We engage with consumers a lot at this time of year with those kinds of messages, because ultimately the best diet that people can have is a sensible, healthy, balanced diet that covers lots of different food groups, in moderation, and meat is a fundamental part of that. And as one person told me when I first joined QMS, is the reason that we have the teeth that we have, and it's not just to eat plant-based foods all of the time. So there is a real responsibility, I think, to talk about why meat is absolutely fundamental to a sensible, healthy, balanced diet.
And in terms of advertising, you've been very brave and very creative. So prior to Christmas, I was lucky enough to get a preview of the Christmas ads that you were running, and they were just great. They tapped into the emotion that people expect from ads at that time of year. And we know that they're hugely effective, not only at driving sales over Christmas, but also throughout the year, and sometimes changing people's decisions on what they buy. How did it go, and what are your plans to continue using TV and I suppose to echo those messages across other channels?
We're actually just analysing the campaign as we speak, so it takes a few weeks after the campaign is finished to properly evaluate it. But we set ourselves the goal to reach 90% of the Scottish adult population with the campaign in total, which was made up of TV, Border and STV, STV Player, and a number of kind of digital channels as well. So we had YouTube, we had Instagram, we had Facebook, we had PR, we had recipes, we had stuff at point of sale. So literally the message was out there sort of loud and proud and in a really kind of wide way. And I think one of the reasons that we felt there was an opportunity to put the brands on TV at Christmas for the first time, we've obviously used TV before, but the timing of Christmas this year, for one, actually created quite a lot of entertaining and kind of family together opportunities. There were, two big weekends in that festive period. So, advertising Scotch lamb, Scotch beef and especially selected pork in the run-up just kind of got those products in people's minds as they were shopping. And I think, just offering a kind of credible alternative to turkey. We would never go out and say, you have to buy this instead of that. But I think it's just giving people a choice. And I certainly know plenty of people that had a big roast during that period and still had turkey on Christmas Day, but the fact that they were having a leg of lamb when they had the family together round a table over that Christmas period is brilliant. And those kind of big roast dinner opportunities are real kind of, uniters of people, aren't they? It's a great thing to all sit round and, have great chat and eat great food. So it was really important to us that we showed all three of the QMS brands. So that's why, the meat was kind of, the hero of the whole ad and campaign. So it wasn't that people are superheroes at this time of year. It's, really making sure that people know that it's actually the meat that is a superhero at this time of year. So the ad was really well received. As you said, it looked great, certainly on screen, certainly got lots of people talking. And, on the assumption that it's done well, we will be thinking about how we incorporate that kind of, bigger budget at the Christmas period. We don't have an infinite budget at QMS. We have to manage our resources wisely across the opportunities we have at different periods of year. So, historically we've done the kind of positive conversations around red meat in kind of early Jan, Feb. Going into spring, we often talk about lamb. Summer, we start talking about barbecues. And then going into the autumn, it's very much about, Love Lamb Week, Porktober, St Andrew's Day, and then we're kind of into Christmas. So it's really trying to make the most of season opportunities, which do seem like a really good way to engage with people. So we haven't started planning for Christmas 2024 yet. We want to see how the campaigns perform first. But I think certainly the early indicators are that it's worked pretty well for us. I hope to be able to share a positive story about that soon.
It's certainly, I think you've done really well. I suspect that the budget was an absolute fraction of what John Lewis and some of those big brand advertising campaigns would have spent. And I think you did a really lovely job and were really smart about hero worshipping each of the meats as well, not just focusing on, you would expect beef to be front of mind for Christmas, but it was lovely to see lamb and pork celebrated as well.
It was, made and filmed in Scotland by a Scottish-based agency who, understand the brands really well. So, I think it was a real Scottish success story, that ad. We're all very proud of it.
Brilliant, Emma. Well, best of luck with the year ahead. It's going to be very exciting watching what you do and what you produce and really how you tell the amazing story of the people behind Scotch brands.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Because we are so lucky, aren't we, that we have the most amazing country and people that make the red meat sector up here what it is. And just, having the opportunity to talk more about, the people and the place. It seems like a really good foundation, doesn't it, to build the brand storytelling on.
Completely agree. And best of luck and thank you. I've worked with QMS since 2018 and I know how much time, effort and passion the team puts into their jobs. Way beyond what most companies would expect. Their budget is limited, but they seem to make every penny count in the most effective of ways. All down to their people, their purpose and the brands for which they are responsible. Thank you for listening to the Quality Meat Scotland podcast. To find out more about QMS's work, head to the news section of the website. And for recipe inspirations, go to www.makeitscotch.com or follow on Facebook, Instagram or Twitter. Thank you for listening.